Hey, Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
How you doing this week?
Oh, pretty excellent. I'm a little hungry for previews, but at least we got a few. How you doing?
Well, it's going to be Christmas this week, so I'm pretty excited for that. I'm eternally a 5-year-old boy, waiting for what's going to come out from under the tree, and we have a couple of things that were gifts for us from a spoiler perspective that are going to be great gifts to talk about. And also, I'm taking some time off of work because it's vacation
Good for
time.
you.
So I'm just hanging out with my kids and doing a little last minute Christmas shopping and talking to my parents on the phone, that kind of stuff that I just don't normally I just don't normally ever hang out with my kids.
Well, thanks for the update, and I'm glad to see you doing well.
So. Yeah, but it's going to be good times. So, Catherine got a bunch of board games and stuff for us to play as a family, kind of a gamery family over the course of break. And she came up to me and she's like, I'm reconsidering if we can play this one. And she'd got a bunch of well-regarded games, and she showed me a copy of Cards Against Humanity. And she was just like, I don't think this might really be appropriate for the kids, which is what I had told her previously. She's just like, no, our kids are cool enough. Then she actually read the box, and then she was just like, maybe you and I will just play this together. That was her follow-up. So,
well,
no Cards Against Humanity with the kids.
No, I don't know. Great game, though. I do want to mention, in addition to being thankful for the times with family and in your case, less instead of more work. Thank you to all the listeners. Major shout outs to everybody who's been tuning in over the course of the past couple of years. We're going into year 3 here, and it's been an awesome trip, and I'm looking forward to many more.
Same.
Particularly, thank you to Scott Klobacha for supporting us on Patreon.
Thanks a lot, Scott. So, super thanks to Scott. Super thanks to everybody who's supporting us on Patreon. And, thanks to everybody who's listening every week and following us on social media. So, we're top-level podcasts at lots of places, including Instagram now. So, last week we said that there was nothing on the Instagram, but before that episode went up, we had actually posted some stuff on Instagram. So, you never know what will appear on the Instagram. It's predictable what will appear on some other things, like on Facebook or Twitter. We'll probably say there's a new episode. But, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Patreon, YouTube, top-level podcasts, and many places. So anyway, we got only a couple of new cards spoiled this week, but I think that they're both interesting and potentially very powerful.
Oh yeah, and very relevant to us. I mean, after all, who do you think of when you think of Tezzeret?
Like a 4-mana black-blue Tezzeret?
Yeah.
Shadow Yasuoka.
All right, well, all right, who's number 2?
Who's number 2?
Who's number 2?
All right, you in Paris.
Yay! Yeah, there's a new Tezzeret the Schemer. I told you last week that, the Tezzeret Master Metal wasn't as good as it gets for Tezzerets.
So, yeah, it's a good thing you were right, because that would have been a poor representation for Tezzeret moving forward, at least relative to his previous incarnation. So, this is the third. I guess this is the third and a half. I don't know, 4th Tezzeret we've seen, but both of the previous...
No. I think both... This is the 3rd and the 4th Tezzeret. I think both of these Tezzerets have purpose.
Well, I'm just saying the previous 2 Tezzerets were both, if not format staples. One of them was like a flagship card, right? Incredibly powerful centerpiece card to an extended deck. And then the other one, obviously players like yourselves did really good work with that. Pro Tour Top 8...
The Tezzeret, the 5 Tezzeret, was also just a vintage staple.
Oh, so it's like another Tinker, right?
Yeah. It also untaps Time Vault.
Oh, well, there you go. That'll do it.
It's both a Tinker and a Voltaic key.
Well, I can see how that would be a staple then, considering the power of those cards in concert with certain other artifacts in a format which includes virtually every Magic the Gathering card.
Yeah, Yeah, but the two new Tezzerets. I mean, we talked about Tezzeret Master Metal a little bit. So let's take a look at this Tezzeret, the Schemer, which is 2 blue-black for a Tezzeret Planeswalker with 5 loyalty.
So that's a nice amount of starting loyalty for a 4-mana
Pretty good chunk.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a pretty good chunk. His +1 ability is create a colorless artifact token named Ethereum Cell with tap and sack to get 1 mana of any color, which is basically a Lotus Petal. His -2 ability is target creature gets +X/-X until end of turn, where X is the number of artifacts you control, and until end of turn. And then his -7 is ultimate, which is not too far off. -7 is you get an emblem. With at the beginning of combat on your turn, target artifact you control becomes an artifact creature with base power and toughness of 5/5.
Okay.
So what's your take?
So this is my hottest take is I'm sure that the first ability used to make artifact creatures, and then it was too good, and that this is actually a very, very good card because of that. That's my hottest take. Then my second hottest take is this card is a virtual 3 casting cost card because of the ability to recoup a mana, and I think that that's going to matter in every turn after turn 4.
Do you think the top ability also made artifact creatures?
The original version of this made artifact creatures. That's what I think.
I don't know. I mean, maybe you know maybe you got some inside scoop or something.
Smells like it made 0/1 artifact creatures, and then this card.
I don't think so.
Bananas.
No, why? Why would they make 0/1 artifact creatures? That doesn't make any sense.
Let's talk about the card as it is instead of
anyway, my point is they already have Servos and Thopters, man. So anyway, Lotus Petals, dude. How do you feel about Lotus Petals?
I mean, I think that that's a high utility ability, right? It's a utility ability for a patient man. So there are a couple of things that you can do with it. One of them is you can either start with a bunch of artifacts, right? Or you can use this to just make artifacts. Like, let's say you have no artifacts at all. Right. You just go bloop, 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 and over the course of X turns, you have artifacts, which means that, just for sake of argument, you can make an artifact go +1 and then go -2 and just kill something that has, 1 toughness over the course of 2 turns. That's probably not the sexiest thing that you can do with the Tezzeret.
That's correct.
But it's a thing you could do, right? And you've still got the artifact in play. I do think that there's going to be many games that, like, oddly, the Tezzeret just accumulates a bunch of artifacts and then figures out what to do later, right? And we know that there's cards like Battle at the Bridge that you could really get paid off for having these artifacts in play. And, you could get paid off even just by his -2. You can go bloop, bloop, bloop over the course of a bunch of turns. And, his -2 can be like a faux ultimate, right? Because this is a card that if you draw it late in the game, let's say you have a bunch of these, like, fake Lotus Petals, right? And then somebody kills your Tezzeret. You could rip a Tezzeret, for sake of argument, play it and have like 5 Lotus Petals in play, and either get in there with a creature for some kind of like forward howl from beyond, or kill a creature immediately, exploiting artifacts that were already in play, including artifacts like Heart of Kiran, right? So we talked before about potentially playing Heart of Kiran in a Planeswalker heavy deck. And, that would be a card that is an artifact that curves under Tezzeret the Schemer, gives you something to do with excess loyalty, etc. So,
and that's actually that's an important point about Tezzeret that we don't get to say about all that many Planeswalkers. I mean, Tezzeret gives you tons of loyalty, right? And that's actually one of his strengths in conjunction with Heart of Kiran, is that Tezzeret starts with a lot of loyalty and a lot more of his power, like by contrast, take for instance, Kiora or well, actually, just lots of all the Planeswalkers that start with like 3 or 4 loyalty, or that have don't have a great plus at the very beginning. I mean, I don't know. I just think that Tezzeret with Heart of Kiran is it's a great way to protect Tezzeret early on,
I actually just can imagine a situation where you're just like, random artifact, Heart of Kiran, random artifact, maybe like a mana accelerator or something along those lines, maybe even a clue, right? And then you're like, Tezzeret, 5 loyalty, take a counter off of Tezzeret, activate Heart of Kiran, -2, swing for 7.
You can even drop Tezzeret, use his minus ability, and then power up Heart of Kirin, and still threaten to defend with Heart of Kirin without losing your Tezzeret. He's got that much loyalty.
Yeah, I mean, if you're defending with Heart of Kirin, you wouldn't. Yeah, he would be a 4/4 again on the next turn. But don't you see that you can slam for 7 like that? That'd be cool beans, right?
Sure, and actually. Going through Tezzeret's abilities, it's kind of. I think we might be well served to start with that plus X minus X ability. Actually, looking at some of the applications, because in some ways, there's a little bit of the how the Tezzeret Agent of Bolas, you being able to just nug somebody for a lot. Was like a pretty good game plan.
But that was like his other ultimate, right? Like that's
right.
Like that card was weird. Like you just killed people with that ability a lot of the time.
Right, and Tezzeret Master of Metal, his -3 ability, an awful lot of the power of that one is just killing somebody, right?
Yep.
So Tezzeret the Schemer can get obviously when you look at the ability, the first thing you see is it's a removal spell. Which is true and good. However, the fact that it can be such a source of extra damage, like bursty damage, it actually works well with a number of cards that are legal right now. Like, for instance, if on your opponent's end step you flash down an Elder Deep Fiend, you can untap, drop Tezzeret out of nowhere, and then boom, just 10 your opponent.
Oh, I think I would like to do that.
What's more, if you got a Metalwork Colossus and a Key to the City, you can just one-shot people from a lot of positions. Assuming they've taken any damage at all, right? It's not that hard to imagine scenarios where your Metalwork Colossus is suddenly a 17, suddenly doing 17 or 18 damage,
Oh, I could totally imagine that.
And the fact that Metalwork Colossus, Sky Sovereign Council Flagship, Elder Deep Fiend, and to a degree Heart of Kirin, but there's a lot of cards that you might all really want to play. Another one, Torrential Gearhulk. On your opponent's end step, depending on what kind of a deck you play, I could imagine some decks that go end step, Torrential Gearhulk, do something, untap, drop Tezzeret, 10, boom. And it's not just burst damage to kill somebody that Tezzeret's plus-minus ability can help you with. Tactically, it can help you kill planeswalkers that your opponent thought that they were going to be able to hold on to.
Oh, for sure.
If you have a Smuggler's Copter, an awful lot of people are imagining that their Gideon is going to make 2 tokens and cost you a lot of tempo. But if you Smuggler's Copter, you don't even need any other artifacts. You could literally just tap whatever creature you have, power up the Copter, give it +1/-1, attack Gideon for 4. So, the tactical implications of Tezzeret the Schemer for extra damage are kind of nice, too. And as far as the removal goes, it's another removal spell that can kill indestructible creatures, right?
Oh, that's a very interesting big deal.
It's obviously it's not trivial to amass enough artifacts to be able to take down, say, Ulamog or something, but you can. I mean, what do you see anything else in particular on Tezzeret the Seeker's plus X minus X?
Tezzeret the Schemer, you mean?
The Schemer, yeah. Sorry.
I think that the offensive thing is I think the kind of the little off angle, kind of off label way to use it, but that, like you said, it's going to be. I think it's going to be really important, right? People are going to hold this kind of like a Become Immense or something. You have Become Immense, and it's a blunt force object sometimes, but also you just kind of sculpt to wait for the spot where you're going to use it. I think that's a thing. And then I think as a removal spell, I'm actually a little. I think that the intent here is that the removal angle on the -2 ability is what they want you to be looking at. With the layout of the card, that's kind of the implied way that the card, the Planeswalker card, protects itself, but that's actually going to be clunkier than using it offensively. Right? You kind of have to have a bunch of stuff, and it's not consistent, right? Like, you don't necessarily know how many artifacts you're going to have at the point that you play Tezzeret the Schemer, nor how big your opponent's creatures are.
Yeah, and it's probably going to vary a fair bit with what kind of a deck you're playing, though, because, like, if you're playing a Metalwork Colossus deck, you might not know how many artifacts you're going to have, but you're probably going to be able to kill. Right, you're going to have enough. But on the other hand, if you're playing Tezzeret the Schemer in a deck that has, like, I don't know, a few accelerators, some Gear Hulks, and it makes its own Lotus Petals, you might totally want Tezzeret the Schemer in this deck, but you just are not reliably able to scheme for more than one or two in, like, a fair number of games.
So, you played a Torrential Gear Hulk-based deck at Grand Prix Denver a few weeks ago, correct?
Right.
So, I played Torrential Gear Hulk a bit also in the present standard. I mean, I guess that's pretty much the only standard you could have played it in. It's a relatively recent card. Do you think that there's going to be a big tension there? Because Tezzeret the Schemer, I feel like it obviously gets to piggyback off of the Torrential Gear Hulk a little bit, but the Gear Hulk, I think, is really hungry for a certain kind of card, and I think Tezzeret the Schemer is also really hungry for a certain kind of card. I mean, well, don't you want to have like 20 copies of those kind of cards in your deck or more, 30 copies?
No, I do think that Tezzeret the Schemer actually works better with Torrential Gear Hulk than might appear on the surface, for a couple of reasons. To start with, and I know this doesn't address the point you were just making out, which is a very, very good one, but I think it's worth noting that Tezzeret the Schemer on 4 naturally gives you Torrential Gear Hulk the following turn. So, like, if you're using Tezzeret the Schemer, you can actually go Tezzeret the Schemer this turn, Galvanic Bombardment something, or crack the Petal if you happen to have any other artifacts, and potentially do something else like Battle at the Bridge or whatever. But you can actually Tezzeret the Schemer, use the mana this turn, and still cast a Torrential Gear Hulk next turn. And it's not like you know how, like, on Garruk and stuff, you can only get the mana basically sorcery speed. You can't get, like, one ahead because you're untapping lands. Not so with Tezzeret. Tezzeret gives you a Lotus Petals so that even if you don't use it right now, you could use it on your opponent's turn, and even if you don't use it on your opponent's turn, you'll still have it for later. It's important to note how much better a Lotus Petal a turn is than getting one mana of any color. So, it's a mana battery.
So I think that that's a really important point, which is that you think of, I think, like, just the surface analysis is that you think of the -2 ability as this is how I protect the Planeswalker, self-contained protection sort of ability, but actually the +1 is really, really elegant in this way, which is that if you combine it with cards like Galvanic Bombardment or Deadweight, etc., that just the ability to produce 1 mana is actually, that's the thing, right? Like, on turn 4, you can both play Tezzeret the Schemer and protect it and gain loyalty at the same time. And actually, that's very different than not being able to do that.
You can actually go turn 3 Cultivator's Caravan. Sorry, like turn 2, play a Metal Spinner's Puzzle Knot or Prophetic Prism. Turn 3 Cultivator's Caravan, and then you could cast anything that you wanted for 1 mana right now. But you could even Battle at the Bridge and kill a Veteran Motorist. But when you untap and drop Tezzeret, your Cultivator's Caravan can give you a black to start. Tezzeret's Petal and then the Prism or the Puzzle Knot means you can actually Battle at the Bridge for 2 and not even lose your Petal. And the next turn when you untap, you tick him up again, and you'll actually have 8 mana already, because you'll have a second Petal and the Caravan and 5 lands. So you'll have 8 mana, plus Tezzeret is now threatening ultimate next turn. And you have 8 mana that you can use to protect your Tezzeret.
So that's actually really interesting, the specific combination of the improvised mechanic and these petals, which is that the improvised mechanic basically makes any artifact into like a land or elf, right? Or a land, whatever. So it's interesting that you have these artifacts that their surface ability is just to produce mana, but that they're producing mana in a non-consumed way. It's I think that's a really powerful synergy, right? So we were already talking about.
I mean, if you can turn your petals into moxes, any color moxes, that's dope. You're doing it.
I mean, I think that if Tezzeret the Schemer's ability was to basically make moxes, it would be. I don't know. I mean,
think about how good Jace the Mind Sculptor's 0 ability is, and all it gives you is Brainstorm. Tezzeret starts with more loyalty. He ticks up, and then the moxes would be of any color. Moxes of any color are better than Brainstorms.
Well, especially when ticking up, right?
Right. So I mean, that's a great synergy. Now it's only moxes for the purposes of casting improvised cards, but that is an excellent synergy and good to identify.
I mean, they went and put the guy on the picture on Battle of the Bridge, so I think they probably are strongly implying that these cards could be played together.
Yeah, I mean, the interaction definitely would appear to be by design, but the fact that Tezzeret threatens to ultimate so fast, I think it's important to note. I mean, you literally put down Tezzeret and have mana available. And even if you spend the petal, you haven't spent the loyalty. And when you untap on the next turn, even if you don't have the Cultivator's Caravan type stuff, if you just put Tezzeret the Schemer down with nothing else, he gives you the acceleration of explosive vegetation for the purposes of ramping from 4 straight to 7.
Oh, wow.
And that's the same turn he's threatening to ultimate the following turn. You literally get explosive vegetation and a planeswalker that is threatening to ultimate. So that's that top ability. And there's more to the top ability, I think, because this is one of those abilities that synergizes with a ton of things a little. So if every time you make a petal, every time you make an Ethereum cell, each time you do that, it triggers all of your Fireweaver, your Fireweavers, I guess your underhanded design. Anything that cares about artifacts coming in, it gives you sacrifice fodder for things like Pia or Metalwork Colossus, and it gives you artifacts that could be going to the graveyard. So if you have stuff that care about artifacts on the way out, like for instance Marionette Master, it works with all that too. Like it's one of those abilities that just synergizes with everything they got going on.
One of the things I think that's subtle about it is that it's fixing at the same time. So you have a card that has a very specific casting cost, so it's like a 2 blue and a black. But you could easily just go like Tezzeret, Ethereum cell, and then cast like Ajani Unyielding or something, right? Which is the exact opposite colors. So I don't think that's very likely to happen, but that's like a reasonably extreme thing that could happen with asking almost nothing of Tezzeret, right?
What you could actually do, I think that there's some kind of, it's one of those Zvi Maushevitz type of deals where the mana base exists. Something needs to be created to fill this void, now that you can see what the mana does, because you can play 4 Aether Hub, 4 Cultivator's Caravan, 4 Prophetic Prism, and then some number of Tezzeret the Schemer, and you're already just playing cards that are like reasonable to play, and you literally just have 15 or 16 sources of any color, and you've only included 4 Aether Hubs for land. You could literally have 2 Inventor's Fairs, 4 Sanctum of Ugins, and you could play 10 basic islands and easily support your Ajani if you wanted. Now, what spells do you actually want to play? I don't know. I just think that it's really interesting that, like, there's some similarities to like when you have 15 vivid lands, the rules are different for you. And the combination of Tezzeret the Schemer, Cultivator's Caravan, Aether Hub, and Prophetic Prism together, plus whatever your lands do, there's something there. There's something there. You know, like what if your deck is blue black, splash all the other colors because you just want Galvanic Bombardment and you just want I don't know. I mean, maybe like there's no reason you have to just have one of each pit, by the way, because it's not like fetch lands with shock lands. All your colors being rainbow. I mean, you could just have maybe you just have Archangel Avacyn and Spell Queller, and maybe your deck just has a Saheeli Rai out of nowhere. I don't know.
Are there things that are like triple green that you want? You could play them. So I think back to about a year ago, and I was toying with Brian Raymer's shell, right, which is the Icefall Regent deck with main deck Encased in Ice, and you said to me, you're like, look, if you have a situation where you have 4 Crucible of the Spirit Dragon and 4 Haven of the Spirit Dragon, the rules for you are different, right? And we ended up with a deck that was just wildly inventive, so different from most of the other decks that were there, and it's because when you have the ability to cast almost any color of spells, you could do something that's really crazy, right? So,
in particular, when it's a mix that other people don't normally have access to, when the rules, like normally you're bound by the rules of which cards the same deck could cast. Whenever you get to break the mold of what other people understand to be the rules about which cards you can put together, there's an incredible opportunity for novel craziness.
Yeah, so I'm going to use a kind of a real simple example, but I think that we can assume that this is like a much more extravagant version of this. Do you ever play like a mid-range control deck and you really like this mid-range control deck in a format like Standard, but it just loses to the top end of the blue control deck's curve, or just like you're so close, and then you lose to whatever combo deck is there, and you say, I just wish I could cast a negate, right? And your deck just can't support it. You didn't have the mana in that format, or there was no negate in that format, right? This is like that. It's just like you could have whatever the capabilities of your deck has at the core, and then you say like, I just wish I could. However you want to answer, finish that sentence, you can finish that sentence.
But like, you could just be like, my deck with no forests and no green dual lands. I just want to have some Ishkanas in my deck. You could just have Ishkana Graph Widow, like out of nowhere in your blue-black artifact deck. You could just have Galvanic Bombardment, despite the fact that you have no mountains, and have it could even still be efficient, or you could have Harness Lightning. I don't know. I don't know what kind of synergies you have.
Yeah, one of the things that's kind of counterintuitively implied by this card, at least in the shell that we're talking about, is blue and black don't have to be your core colors, right? Like, I'm just going to make this up. Let's say you were playing a green-white deck, but you had some of the capabilities that we were talking about, including Aether Hub, right? You just need to get Tezzeret the Schemer down once.
But I mean, if green was your base, you could have Servant of the Conduit,
sure,
or Attune with the Ether. The point is that you just have to get Tezzeret down, and you can be doing even more.
Yeah, you could have like one swamp and one island in your deck, along with Aether Hub and some other color fixing cards, Terrarian, whatever you got. And once he's down, then the entire rainbow opens up, and and it's not hard, I think, to get a limited. To use limited use mana to get something like this down to begin with, and then it starts snowballing afterward.
You might not even have island or swamp in your deck, right? Like, you could literally imagine a deck that has 4 Oath of Nissa and 4 Cultivator's Caravan and whatever, right? Like some Prophetic Prisms. I don't know. You literally might not have any islands or swamps or blue or black dual lands and still splash Tezzeret if you hit a certain threshold of enablers.
That is some Raphael Levy Grand Prix winning stuff you're talking.
Dude, Oath of Nissa is sweet anyway, because when you play Cultivator's Caravan, it's great having things that cost 1 you can play.
Yep.
And when you play Tezzeret the Schemer, it's great having things that cost 1 you can play.
Absolutely. I think that if we're base green, we're probably going to have 1 and 1, but That's just a guess right now because there's just so many. It's just so cheap for you. But I take your idea. You don't have to have them.
The other thing is that there's this set. Who knows how much Henny's expertise type stuff there is, right? Because imagine your blue-black deck, or whatever, right? Like maybe it's a base black deck that splashes all the other colors. I don't know, but like maybe your deck just has Saheeli Rai in it. And Henny's expertise is 3 or 4 more of your fixers, because when you don't draw your red mana, and you didn't draw Tezzeret, and you didn't draw Cultivator's Caravan, and you didn't draw Aether Hub, sometimes you just Henny's expertise and put Saheeli Rai into play that way.
Oh yeah, you could just like totally have like a Sultai control deck or something, right? You're like Henny's expertise Nissa, something like anything, right? These are just all these cards are just fixing, and like you said a second ago. You don't even necessarily need to imply the presence of the relevant basic lands.
And that's not even counting the possibility of stuff like Smuggler's Copter or Key to the City, which could allow you to loot the cards away when you don't have the right colors, right?
Oh, sure.
Or Nahiri the Harbinger, anything in that space. Because it's not like there aren't good artifact looting strategies like Scrap Heap Scrounger or whatever. Or a Scrap Trawler to get stuff back.
Oh, they're great ones, right? I mean, that's actually one of the reasons why blue-white has been such a dominant deck in Standard. Like, in the games that you're winning, you just use Smuggler's Copter to throw away your expensive cards and keep the tempo, right? And then in the games that you're not winning, you use Smuggler's Copter to get to your, card that you're going to need to catch up, like Archangel Avacyn. I do think that the implication on Tezzeret the Schemer is probably very aesthetic to the story, right? So my guess is that Tezzeret's not going to join the Gatewatch. Does that be your guess?
I mean, yeah, he's not going to join the Gatewatch.
So I look at a lot of the other cards, a lot of the other Oaths, for example, and you're like, all right, these guys can all play together nicely. There are definitely different schemas that I can imagine this card and this card being in the same deck together. But I think Tezzeret implies his own school, right? Where a lot of the other Planeswalkers can be like, oh, I'm going to play a deck that has like 12, 15, 16, 20 Planeswalkers. I think Tezzeret's likely, he could possibly be in a shell like that, but I think he's much more likely to be a thin number of Planeswalkers surrounded by artifacts. I think that's
interesting. So
that's just very story-driven, deck-driven kind of hand-in-hand.
Well, so first of all, obviously Saheeli Rai, that there's something there, right? Like they both call out artifacts in a way that, so that's already, there's one right there. But what's interesting is that both Liliana is like the super dope 3-cost walker. Beside, like, Nis is obviously great too, but Liliana is a great 3-cost planeswalker
in a different class.
So like Liliana and Saheeli Rai, now you're talking about a lot of turn 3 planeswalkers for powering up your Heart of Kiran. So like, maybe there's a deck that has Saheeli Rai, Liliana, and then Tezzeret the Schemer and Chandra Torch of Defiance at 4. And then maybe even Obnixilis and possibly even Jace or whatever. I mean, who knows, right? Like, but because I mean, Tezzeret the Schemer powers out Chandra Flamecaller even a turn early if that's your jam. But the fact that he only gets to use the plus sec, like his top ability, the Petals, is obviously great in a Planeswalker deck.
Multicolored Planeswalker deck, yeah.
And then the ultimate works if you've been making any Petals at all. And you don't even need to have that many, because all you really need to do is have a couple artifacts laying around, Prophetic Prism or something, Heart of Kiran, something, I don't know. But because, like, by the way, remember, when you power up Heart of Kiran with Tezzeret, it still has Flying and Vigilance.
It's just big.
Right, it's 5/5 instead of 4/4, and it doesn't need a crew.
That's a big deal.
But it's sweet that it has Flying and Vigilance already. Like, that's a combo. And then the number of artifacts you actually have to play, it's a little confusing. Because, I mean, what if your deck has Pia and Kiran Noir, or Whirler Virtuoso? What if your deck, what if your deck has, I mean, you got a Torrential Gearhulk, Cultivator's Caravan. You could be making clues. I don't know. Like, there's a variety of different ways you might end up with some artifacts, even if your deck has a dozen Planeswalkers.
You could play that 5 casting cost counterspell that just makes 3 clues.
and it's not like Oath of Chandra and Oath of Liliana, and even Oath of Jace. It's not like those are bad with Tezzeret.
So I think you make an interesting point, right? What if you played a deck, and it probably would never do this extreme, but it's a perfectly reasonable just thought construct, which is like, what if you had a deck that had no artifacts, it just had Tezzeret the Schemer? Is the ultimate good enough that you would just play a card that was just like +1/+1 -7?
I don't know. It depends on if you had to crack those petals, right? Like, I think it'd be more likely you go +1/+1/+1.
Yeah.
And then -7.
You could always draw another Tezzeret, something like that. But I mean, I'm just saying, is there a structure that says that -7 is so strong that that's a legitimate strategy?
See, I was actually thinking that the +1 is so strong that might be a legitimate strategy.
Oh, well, that's a good point. Because I actually am imagining, I bet that there are decks, like especially certain types of control decks, that would not immediately scoop, but like long game be a massive disadvantage against the -7. Like they're just not set up to deal with non-creatures that are creatures sometimes, and they don't want to use cards against it, and that it's an emblem, right? So you're just like in this kind of downhill epic place. I think that might. I can now imagine a situation where I'm siding in Tezzeret the Schemer to beat certain decks, just going +1/+1, perhaps +1/+1/+1 -7, and like you said, the +1s are very strong.
And the fact that you get to power up incidental like clues or servos, or because like maybe your artifactless deck has Pia and Kira Noir or Whirler Virtuoso or whatever, like getting to power up some of that stuff is kind of nice. So I don't know. I think that there's something there.
Man, Whirler Virtuoso, what a magic card! That guy's really good.
Oh yeah. The fact that the ability stacks up the petals, I think is a bigger deal than may appear on the surface. It's not just a majoring network; they're of any color, and you can break them up in increments, and you're never shields down. And like when you just play Tezzeret by himself, now you're at 7 on turn 5. With that Cultivator's Caravan, you're talking about 8. You're talking about like literally the next turn having enough to play a Torrential Gearhulk and protect it with a negate. Now, I don't know when Nicol Bolas is going to come back, but man, Tezzeret the Schemer seems like it might be like tailor-made to help Nicol Bolas come down a little early.
Oh, sure. I mean, the guy has been an agent of Bolas.
And I actually am not convinced that, like, I could imagine Tezzeret the Schemer being used in an Eldrazi deck. Because you could be playing with Hedron Archive and Tezzeret, and he's making petals. But if you put him out on 4 with no other accelerators, and you could easily have like a Corrupted Graphstone or the 0/1, but even if you have no other accelerators, it's 7 on turn 5 by itself, and 9 on turn 6. So like, it's getting you ahead really efficiently. And then your opponent's facing facing down both Tezzeret's Ultimate and Ulamog.
Well, yeah, so just one Hedron Archive in there is just implications on a hard cast 2 turns after Tezzeret, right?
Yeah. So I think definitely excited about that. I did want to mention, though, his abilities, the way they work with lifelink. Like, target creature gets +X/-X. I think it is a totally reasonable play in some scenarios to power up your Kalitas. And then just gain 6, gain 7. Depending on like how much, if he's been buffed at all by any zombies or whatever. But even without, you could just have 3 artifacts in play and hit your opponent for 6. And gain 6, The fact that your Kalitas is becoming a 6/1 instead of a 3/4.
I think that's great.
And the if you end up finding an artifact creature with lifelink that you actually want to play, because like we haven't seen the whole set yet. Who knows? Maybe there's a worm coil engine or something, right? But if you find an artifact creature with death touch or with lifelink that you really want to play, if it's like a smaller one, like obviously the worm coil token would be a 3/3 that you could turn into a 5/5 and it would keep its lifelink. But who knows? I mean, like what if they have like an Ink Moth Nexus, but instead of infect, it has lifelink, right? Like who knows what they could put in the set? 'Cause that was one of the big moves. Like when I played in Paris, Tezzeret Agent of Bolas, his ability to turn something into a 5/5 was particularly effective on the 1/1 flying infect creature from the Ink Moth Nexus, So I'm curious to see what they have in this set that might be tailor-made for Tezzeret to power up.
It doesn't take very many hits to win when you could turn an Ink Moth Nexus into a 5/5 creature.
No, not at all. So Tezzeret looks super, super sweet. But you mentioned Ajani earlier. Now, we've already talked about Ajani Unyielding and Ajani Valiant Protector. But what do you think about Oath of Ajani?
This card, I think, is really powerful and very nuanced. And for a card so specific, I think it's amazing that it's gonna do work in multiple very different ways in multiple very different decks. So the card is Oath of Ajani. It costs a green and a white. It's a legendary enchantment like many of the other oaths, and it has the following text: when Oath of Ajani enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Separately, it says Planeswalker spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So this is a really interesting card. In decks with a bunch of Planeswalkers, it really rewards you to play it early. In decks with a bunch of creatures, it really rewards you to play it late. Here's the thing. Some decks can benefit from both abilities, right? So here's just like the most obvious use case. Turn 2, Oath of Ajani. Turn 3, Gideon. Right? That's bananas, right?
Yeah. Hands down. That is certified bananas.
Like, I think that just beats a huge percentage of the decks that exist right now. Like, just facing down Gideon on turn 3, and you're just like, pop out a 2/2, defend Gideon for 1 turn, then it's rock and roll time, right? I mean, you could just easily follow Gideon up with, like, Nissa 5, or, like, something. Like, any of these Planeswalkers, like, people are playing all these different Planeswalkers, right? Everything from, like, Chandra to other Chandra, and just getting Chandra 6 down a turn faster without committing something like Servant of the Conduit, which would die to Chandra's sweeper ability, and then you're just like turn 5 Chandra instead of turn 6 Chandra, sweep and like leave Chandra and leave Oath of Ajani. That's pretty cool, I think.
So turn 2 Oath of Ajani, turn 3 Gideon. I'm with you. Sounds sweet, right? Now take into consideration the fact that with turn 4, if you drop Tezzeret the Schemer and Liliana or Nissa in the same turn, like that's right, because you can actually, each Planeswalker cost 1 less. So on turn 5, you can play a Tezzeret the Schemer and a Liliana or a Nissa.
Wait, so
right, like that's
if you have a mana producing Planeswalker like Tezzeret, right?
Right.
You go, so turn 5.
Or Chandra, by the way. Now, Chandra doesn't give you any color you want, but she gives you 2 mana.
Wow, this is like really, especially, what if you go turn 1 Oath of Nissa, just to make everything easy?
Right. So if you play your turn 1 Oath of Nissa, turn 2 Oath of Ajani, here are some of the things opening up to you. To start with, your Oath of Nissa lets you use your mana for mana of any color for casting Planeswalkers. So both Tezzeret and Chandra are going to let you go Berserker, right? So you could actually go turn 2 Oath of Ajani after your turn 1 Oath of Nissa. Turn 3, you can play Chandra plus use the mana to play Liliana or Nissa. Same turn.
So you go turn 3 Chandra, red, Nissa?
Yeah. Or Liliana or Saheeli Rai if you wanted. But you could just go Chandra and Liliana both on turn 3.
So what if you went like turn 2 Oath of Ajani, turn 3 Tezzeret the Schemer +1, untap turn 4 Tezzeret the Schemer, so you have 4 lands and 2 Lotus Petals, so that's 6 total. You could play like 2 4-mana Planeswalkers that turn, right?
Oh, at least. And that's assuming none of them make any mana. You could also cast Deploy the Gatewatch.
Could you go like... Let me think for a second. Could you go... I'm trying to get crazy here. Like Chandra Sorin?
You talking about Chandra 4?
Yeah, Chandra 4. Sorin? So 3...
No. Wait, if you didn't... So you're talking about on turn 3 you play Tezzeret?
Yeah.
And on turn +1 keep the petal?
Yep.
Turn 4, when you have a second petal, you'll have 4 land, 2 petals. Chandra net costs you 1, and Sorin Sorin, I guess, costs you 5. So yeah, you actually can cast Chandra and Sorin.
Wow.
And that's on turn 4. You're getting your Chandra, but you're also getting a Sorin on top of it. So you'll have 2 4-cost Planeswalkers and a 6-cost Planeswalker in play by the 4th turn.
Yeah, I think there might be a different archetype coming out of Aether Revolt. Just
Dude, imagine
mono Planeswalkers.
Turn 1 Oath of Nissa, turn 2 Oath of Ajani is so just the world is your oyster. I mean, you could go... We already talked about how on turn 3, you could... On the 3rd turn, you can literally have a Chandra and a Liliana, which is just insane. Like, that's already insanity. But in addition to having a Chandra and a Liliana on turn 3, on turn 4, you have access to... God, you could play... you could play... I guess you could play a Sorin without even hitting your land drop. And you already have 3 other Planeswalkers in play. I don't know. This all seems very exciting.
It's super playable, right? Like, you're not even trying right now.
Well, you're trying in that you, I assume, have a deck that's not just forests and plains. Like, how are you functioning when you don't have Oath of Nissa and Oath of Ajani? But I don't think you have to try that hard.
I think you probably have some color fixing, some Aether Hubs, maybe some Servants. Like, I think those things are probably present in this shell, because you're gonna want to hit green mana early, right? So if you don't have Oath of Nissa on the first turn, maybe you'll play, like, I don't know, Traverse the Ulvenwald or you know, something along those lines.
Attune with Ether.
Yeah. This is interesting though. Like, I think this deck will be powerful from a 30,000 foot abstract view, but it's going to have something to contend with Marvel, assuming Marvel is still a thing.
You're talking about like some kind of a disruption?
Yeah, I mean, like, you could have like 3 sweet Planeswalkers in play, and your opponent just goes Marvel, tap it, and you're in trouble. That's all.
Lotus Petal. The Lotus Petals are a good way to power your Ceremonious Rejection.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I think that's one of the heretofore unsung things that Tezzeret the Schemer is going to do. Just go like petal, petal, or petal, 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 and then just cast a counterspell off of it. And, you know, every time that happens, people are going to be like, oh yeah, I guess I could have seen that coming, or at least they had to sacrifice their petals, but it's still going to be good.
Man, this deck seems like it could curve out pretty fast.
Yeah, I think the dream draw in this deck is real dreamy.
This is interesting, man. And I don't hate that Oath of Chandra can get played off your Chandra pretty efficiently.
Well, that's cool.
Like, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, like maybe a bunch of Oaths are good. So Oath of Nissa is obviously great in this deck. Oath of Ajani is great in this deck. I guess anything that piggybacks off the presence of Planeswalker speed is like Oath of Jace.
Maybe the biggest risk with Oath of Liliana and Oath of Jace is that when you have an Oath of Ajani, you're really going to want to play a Tezzeret, a Chandra, or a Gideon on turn 3.
Yeah, like a
right?
cheat.
And when you don't have Oath of Ajani, you're going to really want to just hard cast your Lilianas and your Nissa Voice of Zendikars, right? So, like, there's a real limit to how many 3s you can play that are not Planeswalkers. But I don't know. Maybe. I mean...
So that's only the second half of the text on Oath of Ajani. If that were the only text on Oath of... Actually, if that were the only text on Oath of Ajani, it would still have sparked the conversation that we just had. Also, thank goodness this card is a legendary enchantment. This would be super abusive if you could have multiple in play.
Yeah, no question. I mean, this one is... Stacking these would be crazy.
So, now obviously, we would like to, but we can't always choose the order in which we draw our cards. But there's the other ability on Oath of Ajani, which is when Oath of Ajani enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. There's a lot of ways you could have like one creature in play or a bunch of creatures in play, depending on how you build your deck, right? We already talked about playing the 3 casting cost Nissa. That guy makes a lot of tokens. Gideon makes tokens. I mean, Ultimate Liliana makes a heck of a lot of tokens, right? And this is just like I guess it's a medium ability on Nissa 3, or kind of like a mini Crusade.
I mean, Oath of Ajani, it's like just a 2-cost spell that puts a +1/+1 counter on all your creatures. That would already be interesting. There are some people who would be in for that. Because, like... I mean, when that card's been printed in the past, it's cost more than that. Like
Thrive.
Yeah, but you can, for 2 mana, we're actually talking about it being as a constructed card. And that's to say nothing of +1/+1 counter synergies. But, like, token decks could be in the market for this anyway, without even the bot. I think you could potentially see Oath of Ajani in decks where, like, it has just, like, 4 Nissa and 4 Gideon, and that's the only Planeswalkers done. But you just want to power up your Ishkana, Graph Widow, Spider tokens. I don't know. Right, like normally the big drawback with accelerators is that if you draw them anytime besides your opening hand, they're really not doing much, right? Like Llanowar Elf is amazing Magic card, not what you want to draw on turn 4 or turn 5. And Oath of Ajani is an awesome accelerator if you ever draw it in your opening hand, but it's also an awesome Anthem effect later. Like if you draw multiples of these, now you're starting to get like they're just spells that are +1/+1 your team, and it's not like you can't get both worlds. There's going to be scenarios where you don't have Oath of Ajani in your opening hand, and instead you draw it on turn 4 awkwardly, and you just play your Gideon anyway, right? But then on turn 5, you could actually go Oath of Ajani, power up my, maybe you have at this point 2 Gideon tokens and a Tireless Tracker or something. You power up your 3 creatures, and now your Oath of Ajani is in play, and you can actually, in that same turn, cast a Nissa without even... Well, you could have cast the Nissa before the Oath of Ajani, but you could be potentially using it as your 6th mana source for, Ajani 6 or Chandra or Sorin or whatever. But there are also just going to be times where your opponent kills a Gideon after it's made 2 tokens. And you're going to just cast Oath of Ajani, or you're going to have Oath of Ajani in play, and you're going to be able to just cast Gideon and another card that you want in the same turn. It sounds funny, but seriously, if you just cast, Smuggler's Copter and a Gideon for 5 mana, that's great when you only have 5 mana.
I think that there's also, this is, I guess, true for any cheap cards, but the fact that you have this card and it only costs 2 in games that go a long time, there's kind of a storm effect, right? Where, let's say you just, have accumulated a bunch of creatures, from Nissas or from just having creatures, whatever, incidentally, from Ishkana. You could just play multiple, either you have Oath of Ajani sitting there from turn 2, or you don't, right? And you just didn't cast it. You could cast 3 in one turn, and you're just +1/+1/+1 across a bunch of different bodies. And I think that's just a thing that can happen because the card is so cheap. And it's also a thing, and I think this is a little subtle, people aren't necessarily... That's not what they're looking for, where they're like, all right, how do I play against my opponent this turn? What's going to go on? They don't necessarily think you're going to, deploy 3 constructed cards to put a +1/+1 counter 3 times across all your bodies. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's ways to abuse it as a permanent too. So like if you have Nissa 5, the Vital Force, if you use Nissa's minus ability, you can get back your second Oath of Ajani, because you could go in one turn, go Oath of Ajani, second Oath of Ajani, and then Nissa Vital Force to get back Oath of Ajani, Oath of Ajani again, and now you've just permanent overrun your tokens.
That's pretty cool.
And it doesn't have to go to the graveyard for you to be able to abuse it. If you have any kind of bounce, anything that can actually return one of your permanents to your hand, you can get a pretty nice spell-like effect out of it. Like, I don't know, maybe you'll just Jace Unraveler of Secrets or something, right? Like, who knows? Who knows what you're going to do? The ability to put +1/+1 counters down is also it's very applicable to some cards that have been good in the past and might be good again with just the right nudge. Like, picture Lambolt Pacifist. That's a guy who appreciates a +1/+1 counter, right?
Oh, for sure. Right, you just turn him straight on. Right.
Like, that's a very worthwhile place to put a +1/+1 counter. And I don't know what kind of decks you might end up playing, but like, I mean, you could have like for instance the Pummeler. Pummeler appreciates a +1/+1 counter.
He does. In a way, most creatures just would never appreciate it in the same way that Pummeler does.
Right. Like he appreciates it twice as much as everybody else. But I think Oath of Ajani is definitely one of the most exciting cards to think about, to work with, to brainstorm with. But we actually have a few more. Like, there's actually like, we talked about Quicksmith Rebel briefly last week, but its partner in crime, Quicksmith Spy, has been unveiled, and this one has draw a card on it. This one's 3 and a blue, 2/3. When Quicksmith Spy enters the battlefield, target artifact you control gains tap, draw a card for as long as you control Quicksmith Spy.
Man, are people going to kill Quicksmith Spy?
Oh yeah, for sure. It is slightly more durable than the Quicksmith Rebel, which could die to Galvanic Bombardment straight up, or Kozilek's Return, but it's still relatively fragile. However, you gotta draw a card, right?
I mean, that's extraordinarily powerful. That's like all anyone ever wants to do in Magic, right? Like, what do you want to do? Draw another card.
So this guy's like she's like an archivist with haste, right? Because you put her down and immediately tap your Pilgrim's Eye or your Prophetic Prism or your Metal Spinner's Puzzle Mat or whatever, right?
I just love the ability to take some random artifact that wasn't doing anything,
like one of your cells from your Tezzeret that they already killed,
and it becomes just awesome.
But now, if you have Key to the City with Quicksmith Spy, now instead of tapping the key to discard a card, you can tap the key to draw a card, and then when it untaps, you draw a card, and then your draw phase, you draw a card. And then you can tap it to draw a card.
Key to the City is just the big winner with this set, it looks like.
Right, like, that's exciting, right?
It's making guys unblockable for Tezzeret the Schemer. It's good with Quicksmith, good with other Quicksmith.
Yeah. So here's another one. So Quicksmith Spy in Modern.
Really?
Okay, you ready? So turn 2. How about Grinding Station and Blasting Station as some artifacts you could play? So, just as a refresher, the stations were some cards from Fifth Dawn that had you could sort of build some weird contraption if you got enough of the right types of stations together, where each one has a tap and
do a
basically
small thing, basically.
Right. But then each one has an untap ability that's triggered by a different thing. So, like, Grinding Station, for instance, you can tap and sacrifice an artifact. Target player puts the top 3 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, and when an artifact comes into play, untap grinding station. So if you put Quicksmith Spy's ability on a grinding station, you can immediately tap grinding station to draw a card. You can then play an artifact from your hand, like anything, like a Mox Opal, whatever. Untap grinding station and draw another card. Well, obviously go to the extreme. Imagine your deck has tons of Mox Opals, Mishra's Baubles, Springleaf Drums. Maybe you have like a bunch of zero-cost equipment. I don't know. But if you just have, or maybe you have an Ethereum Sculptor or something that makes all your ones cost 0. The point is that every single artifact now that you play draws you another card. And that's assuming that you only have one of these things going, right? Like you could potentially have 2 Quicksmith Spies eventually, where you play a second Spy, put it down on something else that has an untapped condition. Because there's actually lots of things that have untapped conditions. Like we mentioned Grinding Station. Blasting Station's one that people have actually used for a variety of other reasons. Blasting Station is 3 cost, tap and sacrifice a creature. Blasting Station deals 1 damage to target creature or player, and whenever a creature comes into play, you may untap Blasting Station. So if your deck has a bunch of Memnites and Ornithopters and stuff, now they're untapping your Blasting Stations and your Grinding Stations. And I don't know. I mean, there's other ones too. Like there's a guy that costs 3 colorless. That's like whenever God, what is he called? He's some horrible. I don't know. There's a bunch of weird stuff in Modern that lets you untap for doing stuff that you want to be doing anyway. And that's to say nothing of the sheer number of cards that let you pay a mana to untap them. Right, like there's artifacts that Staff of, is it Domination? For every mana you pay, you untap it. So you can go from, once you put Quicksilver Spy's ability on a Staff of Domination, every mana you spend, you can draw a card.
Oh, that's incredibly powerful.
Heaven forbid you have a Krark Clan Ironworks, then you'll draw your whole deck. Right, assuming that like you have as long as you have a critical mass of artifacts, you can just keep sacrificing your artifacts to net like every artifact, like a Mishra's Bauble, you can play it and then sack it for 2 mana and draw 2 cards. So you've got like a perpetual Cadaverous Balloon Prosperity thing going.
So first I was a little skeptical when you're like, oh, Quicksmith Spy in Modern. I was like, oh, I think it's a little slow to be playing, even if you're going to call it an Archivist with haste. But in the context of a deck like Ironworks, I don't know, I think I might change mine too. And it's just a combo piece then, right? It's just like some rocket fuel that you're pouring into the engine.
Well, what if you had, and this is not even counting, God, if there's things that if you like Ashnod's Transmigrant them or whatever, if you find a way to turn your guy into an artifact creature, there's all kinds of things that become, open to you then. But like, if you just Quicksmith Spy with any, like there's so many different ways to untap things over and over again. But there's also, like, you can do stuff like you can Quicksmith Spy your Pilly Polly. Pilly Polly has an untap ability. Right? Like, when you Quicksmith Spy your Pilly Polly, you can just, every mana you spend, you can draw a card already. And that's to say nothing of if you, I don't know, have stuff like Training Ground or whatever where you're infinite now, I don't know. It's interesting, some of the things that open up when you can just give things abilities that they were not intended to have in the beginning,
Yeah, I mean, I think that my first impression on some of these Modern ideas is that, oh, that's kind of cute. But, like, now I'm thinking, like, maybe you could just kill somebody pretty quickly with this. And if there's enough of a support system for it, it's very, very Storm-like. Yeah,
I mean, picture you're playing some sort of a, like, I don't know, maybe you're playing like a Pure Steel Paladin deck that has like 20 zero-cost equipment. You could first of all, obviously you have no shortage of artifacts around that you could use to draw cards off a Quicksmith Spy. But if you're carrying off of your triggers because of things like the grinding station, suddenly all the stuff you wanted to be doing anyway, like Paradoxical Outcome, might have extra uses. Anyway, I just think Quicksmith Spy is kind of interesting. Obviously, it's fragile enough and Modern's busted enough that who knows if it'll really work.
Yeah, but if you pick a spot, say your opponent taps out for a Liliana or something on turn 3, you have a clear turn 4, and you have some setup mana already or setup artifacts already, maybe you just go off with it, right? I mean, you always have to, like, a lot of the decks that ended up being interesting combo decks, you know, play preposterous cards, and you know, somebody had to fit them together in somehow, right? Like, I think it's unusual when it's like, well, this entire deck is predicated on damaging yourself a lot, right? Or giving yourself a bunch of poison, right? Like, that doesn't sound normal, but then they end up being highly viable decks. I think that Quicksmith Spy seems like it has a lot of interesting utility. Maybe you could just use it to grind out of your sideboard. I don't know.
Yeah, it does some novel things, and that alone is already kind of like, that's kind of interesting to me.
So, anyway, Patrick, I hope you have a real Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to everybody at home.
You as well. Say hi to your family for me. I miss them already.
I will.
It was awesome seeing them a few weeks back, you know, and I hope you guys enjoy this brief reprieve you have from work.
Yep.
And thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you guys next week for our final episode of the year.
Yep. Thanks so much for listening in every week, and, you know, please subscribe if you haven't yet.
Absolutely. Share us on everything. All that.
All right.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.
See you guys. Bye.
In life didn't work so great. Tried to play dredge, for jail or hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis state. Lost a lot of friends, got